Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, March 7th, 2018.
I'm Anthony Majoni from Sunrise Philly Magazine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello in less than snowy Buffalo. And this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Apparently, my friends on the East Coast or close to it are getting destroyed right now.
We're not getting destroyed. I mean, we probably have 3 inches.
Yeah, we're a little higher up here where I'm at, Russ, Northeast. It's probably about 4 to 5 and still climbing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right, let's talk about some of the games last night. We're also going to touch on, because I was just saying to Anthony before we started the show, we're a month away from the playoffs, and already I'm sick of talking about Pittsburgh and Tampa and Nashville in the East and the West because everybody accepts them as the leading contenders. And I think it's more interesting to talk about the dark horses and what the path they would have to take, or what probably the most likely path they would have to take to get to a Stanley Cup final. So we'll talk about that after some of the games. Russ, I watched a little bit of the Rangers Jets, and I think it was a window in. And I've watched the Jets more over the last couple months as they sort of risen in prominence.
Yeah.
The thing that was scary, and I could just imagine our friend Peter Tessier pulling his hair out of his skull last night when Wheeler and Scheifele collide, and Patrick Laine was off the ice for a little bit at that point, and that was like the top 3 guys on the Jets being potentially injured. But they ended up winning 3-0. And again, the depth of that team, and I think Mason played that game. That's a big victory for them. And I'm just saying, you see why everybody's putting them up there as one of the top contenders.
Yeah, no question. And really, Lundqvist was playing out of his mind, and that team was really, really good. And it was one of those situations where you kind of wondered if the Rangers could score a little bit, could they actually get back in this game? If it was under normal circumstances and they had more players or even better players, Mason made some great saves too. I want to say one on Zuccarello on the doorstep was unbelievable. It was a good goaltending game though. At the end of the day, that's what was on display there. And the Rangers just let Laine. I mean, the first goal you couldn't do anything about. The second goal, guys were standing around, guys like Neil Pionk, like they don't have the defensive core to cover a Laine right now.
Well, and Anthony, the thing is with Winnipeg, I mean, they have a playoff spot, but right now I think they want to finish in second place in the Central. They're 6 points behind Nashville, so it's going to be tough to catch them. But they're 6 points ahead of Minnesota, and right now I think they want to stay where they are right now. But they cannot play Hellebuyck every game going down the stretch. They need Mason to play an odd game here or there and give Hellebuyck a little bit of rest going into the playoffs.
Exactly, and it's really a good thing to have a guy like Mason with prior, extensive starting experience who you can count on to give you some really good starts. And again, I'm sure going back in, playing against a team that he was very familiar with in the Rangers, although again, some of the personnel may be a little bit different, but he had all the motivation in the world to certainly, because when he signed there originally, he was looking at, potentially at a starting gig. Hellebuyck has done a wonderful job this season, but it's good down the stretch to have that dependable, really 1A starter. I mean, he's capable of if Hellebuyck goes down with injury, I think they will be okay with Mason in net. But Hellebuyck gives them that extra element that makes them really such a good team. So again, good start for Mason, and again for the Jets, an important win here.
Yeah, I think Mason is capable, but Russ, I think that they need Hellebuyck if they have any chance of making a deep run.
Sure, but again, like I said, Mason, he really played great. I mean, it wasn't like the Rangers didn't have any good scoring chances. Look, injuries occur, and if it does, I would expect Steve Mason to play pretty well for them in the playoffs because they have a great defense. I don't think that's going to be a big problem for them. Is there a drop-off? Sure. But I think people overblow what Steve Mason is or isn't. I still think he's a slightly above average goaltender in his league and could certainly get them through a round of the playoffs if there's an injury.
Now, Anthony, I didn't see as much of this game as you did. The Bruins beat the Red Wings 6-5 in overtime. Right now the Bruins, they're without Bergeron, they're without McAvoy. But they're in a situation where I think, they have 4 games in hand on Toronto. They're almost a lock for second place. I don't think they're going to catch Tampa, so they're pretty much stuck where they are. Yeah. At this point, I think, like Toronto with Matthews, they're just hoping, give Bergeron a couple weeks, maybe you can give him 3 weeks, maybe you can give him 4 weeks, as long as on April 12th when the playoffs start, he's 100%. And the same thing with McAvoy. With McAvoy, it's 4 weeks. They're pushing the boundaries of the beginning of the first round, but they just want those guys healthy when the playoffs roll around. But they still score 6 goals against, I think, a very below average Red Wings team.
Yeah, and I mean the Red Wings are what they are at this point right now. Playing down the stretch here. That being said, it was giving the Red Wings a lot of credit for a good fight in this game. Do I think the Bruins may have had a little bit of a letdown defensively in this? Sure. I mean, Khudobin obviously made 30 stops in the game, but again, not this is an opponent that you would think they should be able to kind of get on top of and beat pretty quickly. Obviously, Brad Marchand, tremendous game obviously out of him. Interesting enough, he was also kind of paired up with Anthony Mantha having a big game with 2 goals and 2 assists as well. Mm-hmm. So it was just, again, it was a back and forth affair. And again, Marchand came up big when necessary. And again, Boston is, as you stated, a similar situation to Toronto right now in that they're trying to maintain their spot. Not only that, but trying to lock down the home ice for that inevitable first-round series that's going to happen between the 2 clubs.
And Russ, the battle in the East for that final wild card spot. I mean, I'm taking for granted that New Jersey at 76 points is going to be one of the 2 wild cards. Maybe they can move up into 3rd place in the Metro, but I think that they have at least one of the wild card spots locked with Taylor Hall playing like the way he's playing. But right now the battle is between Columbus, Florida, and Carolina. And last night, Carolina loses. They lost to Minnesota 6-2. Columbus beats Vegas. I think it was in Vegas, which is completely unusual. But they're starting to show their mortality right now. And Florida comes back, ties the game against Tampa, but loses it in overtime. Right now, and I don't know what the effect of Vanek and some of the additions that they made at the deadline, but I have a feeling Tortorella is going to play Bobrovsky to death down the stretch.
He will, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think right now, Florida, with 3 games in hand, are just pacing them. I think it's just one of those things where one of these days Columbus is going to look up and they're overtaken in the standings. Unless Columbus is going to win 90% of their games, which down the stretch, I don't think they're capable. They just haven't shown me that they can do it. Too many things are askew there. I like the way Florida looks. Sure, if Luongo gets hurt, all bets are off. But if he stays healthy, they're going to make it.
For me, watching Columbus in terms of it's a good game for them, obviously, being the Jackets. But that being said, I'm in a similar boat to you guys right now. I think Florida really has good position here on them to keep them out. And I keep coming back to the deadline. They needed a center. Vanek, to me, was almost, I don't want to say a superfluous addition, but I'm not a big Thomas Vanek guy. We watched last year. He just disappeared down after the trade deadline. They needed a center. They needed to go a little harder after Derek Brassard. I really felt that. And the fact that Pittsburgh got him instead makes things, in my mind, particularly difficult. Center is the spot that Columbus needed. Yeah, and they didn't address it.
And after Brassard went, the other 2 top centers, one nobody knew about was Paul Stastny because nobody knew St. Louis was selling. That cost Winnipeg a 1st-round pick. Yeah. And Thomas Plekanec, I'm still scratching my head about that deal with the Leafs giving up a 2nd-round pick for a guy who was a marginal upgrade on Dominic Moore. I don't think he would have been an answer for Columbus because I think Columbus is looking for a top 3 center, and I don't think Plekanec is that anymore.
No, he's not. I mean, there's very few centers out there to get. They didn't get one. It's costing them. It is the way it is. Like Anthony's right. Getting Brassard would have been the best thing that could happen to him. All that said, this is where John Tortorella's got to dig him out of a ditch. And we're talking about like this team like they're behind, and they're not even behind yet, but it just seems so inevitable with the way they've played over the last month.
Yeah. All right. Let's shift to the dark horse discussion here, because, as I said, we've been talking about Nashville and how impressive they are, and right now they're 6 points ahead of Vegas, and it looks like they're going to be, the top in the Western Conference, having home ice throughout the conference final. And I believe they're 1 point behind Tampa, so they're still in the race for the President's Trophy. But to me, they're the top contender in the West. And I think Winnipeg has been given a lot of respect in terms of them being maybe the second team. I know Vegas is up there, but Russ, that's where I think Vegas is a dark horse, even though they're leading the division. And maybe I got to adjust my evaluation here, but yeah, they've had a fantastic year. Nobody expected it. They're leading the division. They're 9 points ahead of Anaheim. They're going to win the Pacific. But they get the wrong matchup in the first round. I almost think that if it's LA or if it's Anaheim, that those teams are favored over Vegas going into the playoffs.
I think they're going to be favored over Vegas. And I know Vegas fans are probably like, well, you guys didn't pick them all year. And it's true.
Right.
And we're still not going to pick them. Or at least I'm not going to. It's so difficult because they're in a spot where you don't expect them to be.
Yeah. This is an unprecedented situation. I mean, in terms of seeing an expansion team doing it, everything has got to be in a prove it to us mode for anybody at this point. I know everybody wants to give them their proper respect in terms of what they've done. 42.
Oh, yeah, what they've done is incredible.
But at the same time, same boat here. If they, as I said, as Mike just said, if they draw in LA, tough matchup for them. They draw Dallas in this case. I think
they might be able to beat Dallas.
I think if the things break right for them, they get themselves into the conference finals against the Winnipeg or Nashville.
Right.
They win that series. I'm not sure.
They're not beating Anaheim. If they have to play Anaheim, they're not.
If they get Anaheim, it's going to be a very tough match. If they get San Jose, I think they can beat San Jose. I think they're.
Yeah, I think there's a chance.
Anaheim's going to have a lot of motivation to. With some of with their players and their legacy right now with the current crew, they're going to be really motivated to try to prove it to everybody.
I think they can beat San Jose. I think they can beat Minnesota. And if St. Louis, Calgary, or Colorado come up and get that first wild card spot, because that's who they would face, I think they can beat them. But let's reverse it here, because the two dark horses for me in the West are those the two Southern California teams. LA, with the addition of Reeder, with Carter coming back. Now their scoring is back up there a little bit. They have Doughty. They have the Stanley Cup experience. If they, it's going to be still a challenge for them to just get in, because there's still a race there. Mm-hmm. But if they get in, I think that they or Anaheim are really hoping that they get Vegas in the first round. I mean, and not to say it's going to be easy, because I think it'll be tough, but I think, there's still that question mark of whether this team has got another gear. And I think that Anaheim or LA would look upon that rather than playing, say, San Jose as an easier course.
It's funny. Like, the more I've been in this game for a while, the more I talk to players, the more I do actually believe them that they don't care who they draw. Like, I think at the end of the day, they are so just focused on just trying to get in the playoffs and win that I don't think they're worried about who they're matching up against. Now, sometimes the GM or a coach might, but I really don't think the players do. I really don't think they care who they play. I really don't.
Well, okay, I want one of you to make the case to me, because I'm a non-believer. Make the case to me for San Jose being a dark horse, because honestly, they're 2 points from being out of the playoffs. Joe Thornton is not back yet. I know that Evander Kane has scored, I think, 5 points in 3 games since the trade, and that's helped them. But Martin Jones has been injured at times during the year. He's back now. They've got the 1-2 punch with him and Dell. I just don't know whether they're strong enough up the middle without Thornton to be able to get in the playoffs. And if Thornton is out at the beginning of the playoffs, whether they can advance. Make the case.
Well, I mean, the only case I can make is if Martin Jones gets 10 consecutive shutouts, they might make the playoffs. Otherwise, I'm out.
I have a tough time with San Jose as well. They've had some deep runs. They do have experience, obviously, with their core that has gotten deep, got to a final. So that's the one area where you can kind of say if they can draw on past experience, and it's tough to do that. I know but I have to count that as a factor. Jones has done well. He's gotten deep into the postseason himself. It's just if they end up getting in and they're playing Anaheim. I mean, we know it's going to be a knockdown drag out, but I think Anaheim would probably overwhelm them. And Thornton, would have to be close to 100% for them to even have a chance in that series.
I think he's coming back with a cane. Like, how could he be 100%? Seriously.
The beard's long enough at this point now, you know, it looks appropriate. So he could probably come back in with a cane.
And it's tough to describe the team that I predicted to be the finalists coming out of the West as a dark horse. But after the first half that they had, they put on a pretty good charge lately. That's the Anaheim Ducks. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10 games. They have 80 points right now. They're 9 points behind Vegas. I think they're going to make the playoffs the way they're playing right now. But the thing is that everybody is healthy. Everybody is back. Even Gibson is back. Which maybe a week from now that's going to change.
But they're covered for that. They are.
Right. This time it's not Jonathan Bernier, it's Ryan Miller, and Ryan Miller has played up to snuff. So that's definitely a plus for them. And I don't think they would be fazed by a first round matchup against the San Jose. The worst matchup for them would be a first round matchup against LA. That would take.
Yeah, that's probably the worst one.
LA is the worst. We have this conversation almost every time the LA Kings make the playoffs. Their backdoor entry, and nobody wants to play them. Probably.
Yeah, right. That's true. Although it's not like John Stevens has been with them there before, so that could be a weakness.
But he's not like he's inexperienced in this case.
Yeah, right? but the thing is, we were going with the old setup for them. The new setup could act differently. It could.
It could. But again, this is not like this is not his first rodeo coaching a team. No. Into a few rounds of the playoffs here on his own, and with much less experience when he was with Philadelphia.
But with a lot more, this is the most pressure though he will have faced on his own as a head coach, and you don't know how a guy's going to react. Like, I think at the end of the day, even though it's not the matchup that Anaheim wants, I still would favor Anaheim based on veteran team, their veteran coach.
I just think it'll be a 7-game series where both teams are blood white, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Colorado, I think Colorado in the West is similar to Toronto last year in the East, where they have a young team, a lot of great young talent, and they would just be happy to get into the playoffs and get some experience. Whereas Dallas, I think that the expectations were a lot greater with Hitchcock coming back, adding Ben Bishop. I saw on the crawl yesterday that Ben Bishop's out for a couple games with a knee injury. That's something to be scared of, Russ, because Bishop's had injury problems in the playoffs during regular seasons, and if it's Kerry Lettinen in goal,
Lettinen's got injury issues too, so it's
a long way down if he hurts his knee and has to get up, or if they have to use Lettinen in place of him. Either way, it's a long way down for Dallas, and they did have Stanley Cup hopes or aspirations, and I do see them sort of dwindling away a little bit. Like, they'll probably make it, maybe.
Yeah.
And if they do, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure there's a favorable matchup for them. Maybe the Vegas Golden Knights is their one favorable matchup. Yeah. But, this team has been inconsistent. They have a lot of great parts. They do. And they've just, I would say, in the last month, picked up the Hitchcock system. It took them a long time to sort of play his way. I don't know how that's going to go. I don't.
Now the only team that we've left out here, and I'll bring them up, but I'm not a big believer in them in spite of the talent that they have, and that's Minnesota. Dubnyk.
My kid's Minnesota.
No, I don't. But
Top team in the state.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Jeez, but I mean, Luke Cunningham is out for the rest of the year with I believe he had an ACL injury.
But was he really ever in? Like, you know what I mean?
but I'm just saying in terms of his, you never know late in the season, a young player. But I think a lot rests on Dubnyk to carry them forth, and I'm just not a big believer in that team right now, but. Can they upset Winnipeg? Sure, but their path could be the most difficult in the entire Western Conference. They would have to beat Winnipeg and then beat Nashville just to get out of their division.
No question, but they are built with defense and goaltending, and Dubnyk does stay relatively healthy. He really does, and we've seen him get hot. That's one thing. Their defense is pretty big and pretty physical for the most part, but they do have guys that can skate too. They have a good blend there. Guys like Dumba, they have guys, and he could be physical too. But, at the end of the day, they're not an easy matchup. Like, it really does. It depends a lot on Parisi, but it's no longer like Parisi or bust. Granlund and Stahl have really helped that offense along. And Eriksson Ek, you never know if he's going to have a good playoffs. Maybe he'll start to kick in. they could be dangerous. I could make more of an argument for Minnesota than I could the Sharks.
Okay, let's switch to the East here, and I'll ask you, both about the team that you cover the most, which is the Flyers. They have a chance of winning the division. More than likely, they're going to finish in the top three. Although Jersey's only 3 points behind them, so anything's possible. They have a game in hand on Jersey, but I get that feeling about Philadelphia that this was a year, maybe not too early, but a year ahead of schedule with the young guys that they brought in with Provorov and Patrick. If they make the playoffs, that's a victory. And I don't know whether, them winning a round is necessary for this year to be considered a success.
I'll let Ant go first. He murmured.
For me, again, this was obviously going into the season. Most people, myself included, looked at the Flyers in the same position they've been in the past, which is they're still developing backdoor entry potentially for playoffs. To be where they're at right now is certainly really impressive considering where they were, in November going into December with the 10-game winless streak. The fact that where they're at is pretty remarkable. Again, the biggest thing I look at is with Philadelphia, and you mentioned Provorov. And again, this is year 2 for Provorov. You also have Goss to spare now now further along in his career, much better defensively.
Yeah.
That's the other thing you look at. And again, you're seeing the kind of impact, too, that Nolan Patrick has now that he's fully healthy. He's turning into a legitimate number 2 center now, top 6 center, a guy you have to account for. And if you got the right line mates with him, big line mates like Jake Voracek on his right. And even though he hasn't scored yet, Oscar Lindblom certainly has looked good. He's good. He's a good 200-foot player, Lindblom.
But are they really putting Simmons on the third line like Dave Isaac said?
I think right now they have Simmons on the third line because of the fact he's just back from injury. I think if Simmons produces
after one period, that'll change.
That could very well change. We could see them potentially swapping off if he has that. But I think early on, it may not be necessarily a bad idea because, again, it can create matchup concerns for other teams that they're going to play. Mm-hmm. But offensively, again, I do need to see a little more out of Lindblom. He's getting close. But everything else about his game is NHL.
He's playing well in the corners. He's playing defensively. But I kind of wonder, is that taken away from his offense? I think it is.
It's possible. But again, I think in this circumstance, at least they want to build from that point and move their way up. He's been close several times where he just looked snake bitten, hasn't been able to get it in yet. It's a good chance where he may crack that first one and all of a sudden floodgates open. Sure. I don't know, it's possible, but the goaltending obviously is one of the things you got to keep an eye on. The rest of the Flyers defense is something else you have to keep in mind. I think they got a very average second defensive pair with Haig. I like Haig a lot. McDonald's McDonald, but then your third pair right now, their bottom 6 is not. Their bottom 3 are not good. I mean,
it's in flux.
Gudas and Manning have been just haven't been good. Oduya got roasted against Florida, although it wasn't all his fault on that play. It was other than Raffle also broke down as well on that play. But again, Oduya's Oduya at this point. He's not the guy from 10 years ago playing for New Jersey or for Chicago. So I think it's tough to really look at Philadelphia and say I think getting into the postseason is going to be a victory for them. Playing Pittsburgh, I think it'll still be your classic series in this case. I think it goes goes 6 or 7 potentially. I think they go back and forth, but it's tough for me to completely look at Philly and say that I think they can win that series. I think they can. I think they're capable. I just think Pittsburgh maybe just have a little bit too much if they do match up with them.
I think tonight Pittsburgh will come in and kind of show the Flyers what they've got just for that reason. Now, granted, Murray's not going to be in there, but just for that reason, because they're going to want to send a message to them like, hey, you are going to probably play us. This is what we are. And I think this will be a telling thing for the Flyers to see how they sort of rise to the occasion. Mrazek's sort of I think lost with his defenders. I think that's his problem. When you get rushed in as a goalie, right, I think the adrenaline takes over, and I think he did great at the beginning, and everybody sort of gears towards you, right, because you're the new guy. But then I think after a few games and when everything settles in, a goalie has to sort of be on par with his defense, and because that defense is a little bit in flux, I don't think he is. And that's why everybody wants to sort of pile on when he doesn't do well, and they're saying, oh, it's the same old Mrazek. I don't know if it's the same old Mrazek, but he doesn't know these guys that well yet. That's an issue.
Yeah. I mean, he is who he is. He is a stop when he acquired as a stopgap, better than average stopgap, certainly.
Yes.
But they, now again, depending on where Elliott's going to be at this point, and we're going to have to figure things out with the amount of starts that Mrazek's had so far. He's running on this is going to be start number 7 in a row.
Yeah.
Lions should play tomorrow against Boston. At least that was the indication that Dave Haxtell gave.
Unless they lose tonight, right? I mean, that's how
things. Again, they lose tonight. Depending on how he play, but also depends on how he plays as well. Yeah. If he doesn't look good, they may decide, hey, we're going to give this shot. We're going to give Lyon a shot here in the back-to-back, and then you play against Winnipeg over the weekend. Well,
okay, now, Russ, based on Saturday in the outdoor game, Washington looked to be, full marks for being, maybe not a contender, but I'd say a dark horse based on where they were last year as compared to this year. Then they go out on the West Coast and they go 4-0 donut against Anaheim. Holtby gets pulled, and this was a surprising thing. I heard this stat last night. Holtby has been pulled 7 times this year. Yeah, all of them on the road. As opposed to somebody like Frederick Anderson, who has been pulled once, and that was in the outdoor game. He had been pulled. He'd been pulled for injury one time, but for performance, he's been pulled once this season. I don't think Holtby's the big question mark with the Caps. I think the big question mark is their defense and whether their defense is good enough. Even though they're in first place, I think they're a dark horse. I think that they need the right path to get to the conference final this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think right now Holtby, and I just said it this afternoon on another show, he is a product of their defense. Like, it's not like – I don't think much has changed in his game, but everything has changed in front of him. And I think that has affected him. Why, I can't give you an answer why maybe it's happening on the road, but I do think their defense isn't as good, although they are producing a lot offensively now to sort of cover it up in the regular season, hence why they're in first place. But that's the thing. I think it's a cover-up. I think the minute the playoffs start, we don't see, unless Ovechkin's going to have a year like he's never had in the playoffs and really score on a regular season pace in the playoffs.
Right.
They could still be in trouble just looking for goals again unless somebody is really going to step up there. So the defense isn't as good. The goaltending's a little off. Their offense is going to have to be what saves them. I don't have a lot of faith in that right now.
Yeah, the scoring depth is not there any longer, Anthony. There's no Justin Williams there. I mean, and now they pretty much for most of the season have put all their eggs in one basket. And if you stop that top line, if you stop Backstrom and Ovechkin, then who's going to score?
Yeah, that's the biggest difference between like last year where they looked like a juggernaut offensive team, and Russ just brought it up. You lose Justin Williams. I mean, he was like the talisman, 7th game talisman. Everybody's like, he's the guy who's going to get them, that little extra sauce that gets them over the top, and it didn't happen. And they're kind of, to me, a team that's sort of in between right now. I think they're in between. They could, again, it could be a case where, we're not expecting them to make a run, and this will be the time that they catch fire somehow in the postseason and get deep, and that Holtby gets whatever it is that's ailing him out of his system before then.
Do we think Barry Trotz is like the right coach? I don't know yet.
Again, Trotz has that history. Trotz is he's never gotten past round 2. Right. You figured it'd be a partnership here that would work, where he'd have the offensive talent that he didn't necessarily completely have as much of during his years in Nashville, and it hasn't happened. So unless they sort of batten down the hatches and are able to surprise people going into the postseason, going deep again. When I started my predictions during the beginning of the year, the Caps were a team where I had some concerns that they were a playoff team. Right. I know it sounds crazy to say that with the amount of talent that they have, but I was worried that there was going to be a little bit of a come down. Now
you weren't the only one. I think there were a few people that felt that way.
Yeah. And I'm still kind of wondering, but we'll see.
Yeah, and Trotz's contract is up at the end of this year, and I know that during Hockey Night in Canada's headlines on Saturday night, they were talking about that his contract was up, and that Todd Reardon, who's been there, I think, as an assistant for a while, has gotten some feelers on other NHL jobs, and maybe it's the time to transition from Trotz to him if this doesn't work out. So we'll see.
Ovechkin wouldn't be thrilled about that, though. That's the thing; they'd have to sell it to him.
Yes. Now Pittsburgh. I only put Pittsburgh in the dark horse category if Murray is out. because then I think the Jerry Casey DeSmith in goal makes that, like Fleury's not there anymore. If Fleury was there, I think there would be no, either one, they'd be a favorite. But if Murray is hampered, or if they have to go with Jarry, then I think it puts everything in question. The team that, and we'll talk about the Leafs last year. I'm looking at the bottom of, like the teams that potentially could get in as a wild card.
Yeah, I got to say, this is like, we've gone, a half hour, and we're just getting to the Leafs. That's an improvement.
Well, I wanted to start on the West because we never.
This is for all the people that say we never talk about the West. Yeah, that was good.
Exactly. No, that's good. Exactly. There you go. Columbus, I think we talked about their lack of depth up the middle. I think Bobrovsky would have to be Dominic Hasek, circa 1999 for them to make a legitimate run to the conference final. Florida the same. I think they're strong up the middle, but Luongo would have to stay healthy. So I put them in. I don't even put them in the dark horse. I put them in the long shot category. I think New Jersey, if Corey Schneider is healthy, with the speed that they have, with Taylor Hall playing the way he has, I put them. I don't put it out of the question that there's a path that they could advance. Russ, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's possible New Jersey can advance. And you know what? Even with Kincaid in there, I mean, Kincaid's a pretty good goalie, and he's been winning a lot of games. You really want it to be Schneider. I'm not saying that there's any reason to want Kincaid in there, but I'm saying if for some reason Kincaid was in there, even if it was for a series, he might be capable of winning it because they have chemistry. They really do. And they have offensive chemistry, and I've noticed a change in Zaka's, starting to get an uptick now. And again, sometimes people expect too many things too fast, but some of these bigger guys do take a little while, with the moving parts, and we talk about all those cliches, but it's true. But Taylor Hall's now in Hart conversation anyhow. He is. And people may not like that, but that's the way it is. I know Mike is smiling because he's thinking about people in Edmonton, but I'm not. I'm just saying people in general. That is Mike. That's not me. Just for pointing out the people on iTunes who can't watch this. But I just think right now things are breaking right for them. And I know about a week ago it was getting a little shaky. Like people were still questioning, can they make the playoffs? And I'll be honest, when I said I thought they'd be like an NHL 500 team at the beginning of the year, which was an improvement, I didn't have that many takers even for that. So the fact that they're doing this, and Will Butcher had just gotten like his 30th assist. He had been off the scoreboard for a little while. I mean, that's if Will Butcher gets hot now, that we're talking here.
And what a concept, Anthony. They add a defense. They add the top four defensemen they needed badly, unlike certain teams that I follow or cover. And it made it.
What did they give up for Vatanen again?
Adam Henrique.
So it's a good player.
That's a deal that worked for both. I mean, that helped them both. So.
Well, if a team is out there like Toronto, like a few other teams that are looking for top four defensemen, it's going to have to be a hockey deal. No team right now is going to give up a top four defenseman unless he's a pariah in the locker room for a first round pick and a prospect.
Watch this exercise, Mike. It would be Nylander for Vatanen. That's what it would have taken. Would you have done it?
No, I don't think it would have. You
wouldn't have done it, but the Devils did.
I don't think it would have been Nylander. I think it would have been the equivalent of Adam Henrique would have been like a Connor Brown.
It wouldn't have been. No, you see, I still think when you want to make these deals, you're always undervaluing what the other team is expecting for a defenseman. I think if you think they would have taken Connor Brown for that, I think Lou would have called in 10 minutes and made that deal. Adam Henrique is so much more effective than Connor Brown.
Well, he's more experienced.
Going into a playoff, it's not even funny.
He's more experienced, but I don't think he's more effective. But anyway.
Oh, he's more effective. Okay. Now you're telling me Connor Brown's as good as Adam Henrique? Is that what you're telling me?
I think at the age that Adam Henrique is now, I think Connor Brown will be as effective as he is.
But we're talking now. We're not talking.
Well, it's a benefit to get Connor Brown now. He's age 23.
Oh my God! All right.
Oh my God. Okay, and he's cheaper. Two teams in the Atlantic, Boston and Toronto. But with Boston, I think, obviously they need Bergeron back. They need McAvoy back. Their problem is they're going to run into Tampa, and I think that is going to be a tough nut to crack for them to get by. With Toronto, I think it's even tougher. They have defensive problems. You look at guys like Zaitsev and Hainsey, who've been played 20 minutes a night for most of the season. I think that there's a level of fatigue there that is showing over the last month or so. Freddie Anderson is going to play 68 games. I think that they need to cut back on that, but I don't think Babcock is going to. Russ, they might get by Boston. I think they have a chance of getting by Boston, depending on how injured they are. I don't see them getting by Boston and Tampa.
No, I don't see him getting by Boston and Tampa. And I really, even with Matthews back, he's not going to be 100%. He's probably going to be 80%. I don't think they're getting past Boston even. Their defense scares me too much. I've seen it. It's definitely still in flux at this point in the season. They can't lock down a lead. And if they're playing from behind, they definitely could catch up, but then they can't. But once they're tied, they can't seem to hold it at that point either.
They can't hold a lead. They're better at holding a lead, Anthony, than they were last year. Yeah. But when it comes down to it, if they're up 4-2 in the third period, and you're a Leaf fan, I would still be worried because they play the same players. They play them to death in the third period. They try to preserve the lead, and a lot of times they're incapable of doing it.
Yeah, it's a tough. And again, drawing a team, especially like Boston, it's going to be especially difficult. Very physical team up front. It's just Russ pretty much hit on most of the points that I would have made as well in terms of just it's going to be tough for the Leafs to get out of the first round.
Okay, one thing before, and we'll answer, Anthony. I know if you need to go, you can go. We'll go a couple more minutes here, but we're going to end the show in a few minutes. But I just wanted to say the thing out there that was hilarious. If anybody sees the team pictures of the Ottawa Senators today, look at the pictures of Erik Karlsson sitting in between Eugene Melnyk and Pierre Dorian, and tell me, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Those pictures with him sitting between those two looks like he wants to be traded, because
I haven't seen the photo, but we don't know how many shots they took.
No, we don't. But the thing is, Russ, when they had a couple pictures with a couple kids and a lady and a gentleman were dressed in Ottawa Senators jerseys on either side. At that point, he's smiling. He looks happy. When he's sitting next to Dorian and Melnyk, it looks like somebody had just put his dog up for adoption.
Look, it's an uncomfortable spot. It really is. I got to say, getting back to Brown's got 24 points. He's only 4 years younger than Henrique, and Henrique has 41 points and 20 goals. So I don't know if they're ever going to be comparable, to be honest.
We'll see. I mean, I know somebody who didn't think he was an NHLer 2 years ago.
No, it's true. He's proved that to me, but
he scored 20. He scored 20 goals as a rookie, playing third and fourth line. So
he definitely made that jump. There's no question.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a couple questions from the chat, and then we have to end the show.
Right. So let's see. Russ, who would be a better playoff matchup in the Penguins' favor, the Capitals or the Devils? I still would have to say the Devils. At the end of the day, you don't want to face Ovechkin and Holtby. You just don't. Even though you feel good about them, about what's happened in the past, you still don't want to face them.
Yeah, there's too much scar tissue there on the part of Washington, and they could lose the Stanley Cup, and if they beat Pittsburgh, I think there's a segment in their fan base that would still be pleased. So if they got that's their Stanley Cup. So if they got by Pittsburgh and then lost in the conference final, I think a lot of people would still say, okay, great job. At least you vanquished the Penguins. But
no, that's fair. Then also we were asked, and I got to give the name because I didn't give the name on the last one. Thomas Smith asks, do we think Brock Besser's absence impacts the Calder choices for the Rookie of the Year? I mean, it doesn't impact the choices. It could impact the winner, but Brock Besser's still going to be in that list. There's no question McAvoy will still make the list. Now he has no chance of winning. I'll say that out of the hopper. I still think there's a chance that Besser could win based on the 29 goals and some of the other things that he's done. But here's the dark horse. You want a dark horse? It is Will Butcher. If Will Butcher gets hot, he's a guy who has 32 points in 66 games as a defenseman. Think about that. There's still a chance for him.
Well, I was going to say, is there anybody that you think you think he could crack the top three out of Barzal, Besser, and McAvoy?
Yeah,
You
because
think
Barzal's the leader right now. But again, if Will Butcher ends up this season with 40 or more points as a defenseman, and he's a plus on the year, yeah, he gets some sheltered minutes. Nobody's going to deny that. But that is a pretty great impact. I mean, it really is. I mean, you think about it, like 32 points as a defenseman. Is there a Leafs? I mean, what does Jake Gardner have? How many points?
he has over 30 assists? I think he's probably 37, 38 points.
Yeah. So I mean, and he's a veteran offensive defenseman. Here's a rookie who's got 32. He's getting close to, causing some ripples here.
All right, one more question and then we're done.
One more question. All right. Okay, here's a good one from Evan T. Young. If Manning, Gudis, and Oduya continue to struggle, will Sanheim ever get a chance? His underlying numbers were solid before he was demoted. Again, he was not demoted. This is a kid who has not really made it yet. I know writers wrote it as a demotion. It's not a demotion. It's a demotion if you're a starter at the beginning of the year and you've got NHL time under your belt, a lot of it. He doesn't have that yet. Ron Hextall wants him to play all the top minutes and all the top power play and everything else in Lehigh, go through the playoffs and do that. He's only going to use Travis Sanheim if there's massive injuries and he can't do anything else. He's not bringing up Travis Sanheim just because the defense is struggling. I don't believe that'll happen.
Yeah, and I agree with that assessment. And in Toronto, there's a little bit of a debate right now because they've had a defensive rotation on the bottom pairing between Connor Carrick and Roman Polak, and who's going to play in the playoffs. I would bet the house that on April 12th, when the playoffs start, the right-hand shot defenseman on the bottom pairing for the Leafs will be Roman Polak, and that you will not see Connor Carrick play unless somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, I agree. And even Evan T. Young has one more real good one.
Yep.
Hey, will Couturier ever get Selke recognition he deserves, especially with Bergeron now hurt? He is. He was number one for me, or number two. He was number two behind Bergeron. Sorry,
he was on my list too as well.
Not preseason, midseason.
Midseason. That's correct.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Great job. Thanks to Anthony Mangione for coming on the show at short notice. The snowbound Anthony Mangione. For us going on, Michael Agello, thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.